some technology is changing. And as we get into next year and over the next 3 years, the technology, particularly with our radio system, changes where it moves to another platform. And that's driven by our partner right now, where we're a contract with the Washington County's communication system and their partners. And in that, based on money that they received as part of a bond ballot that was approved there, about $77 million, we're moving to upgrade the radio systems, the backup that goes with that, and the infrastructure. And if we were to do nothing as of today, and we now participate by design, and we like the service that we received and the service to the officers in the community with the 800 megahertz system, that we can get at a point of sometime in the next 2 years, maybe as short as 1 year, of not being able to communicate with equipment that we had. Several months ago, we received a quote because we were interested. What would it cost for us to participate in the system? I think in the ongoing operations, the kind of budget we have now and what we project, would be very comfortable for us to participate and continue to have a quality service and affordable service with the monies that we expect and what we have now. What we don't have is the money that was estimated for some improvements to our system. Now, I gave you a spreadsheet, and it's difficult sometimes to read spreadsheet, particularly for some of the titles in there. And so we're going to talk about those a little bit of, well, what are the kinds of things that are being asked for? Kind of, ABCs that most of you already know, but we're talking about a radio system, the radios that the officers have in their cars and in our dispatch system, and then a dispatch system. And we are unique to an extent that we have our own dispatch center. We have a long history of that right in this building, and we offer that. In Clackamas County, and our neighbors to the north, Clackamas and Washington County, not all the cities have dispatch. As a matter of fact, there's 3 dispatch centers in those counties that serve all the cities. So that is a separate discussion, related but separate. But so far, what I've been going on the my impression of the direction, the preference of council is going to see, can we maintain a dispatch center here, and that both the dispatch center and our radios are upgraded to meet the needs of what are coming. So that's one of the things you'd be thinking about in directions, that's the way I've started to go down the road. There are alternatives, some that have been discussed a lot, some that are controversial or at least heated, like switching over and going with Yamhill County, which is a different system. And if you want that additional information, then we will get it. But at this point, have not gone that road. So on that spreadsheet you see, there's, I think it's about $4.9 million. We think with some cuts from that and an updating of that spreadsheet, that I've been working in a target of saying that I've got to identify $4 million in either additional revenues, cuts, or even driving that list down to be able to afford us going to a conversion or an upgrading of our system. And it's on just the memo about we either change, we know there's a change in radio technology. It's coming soon. Are there less costly proposals to what we got, or ones that we can seek out that are reasonable? Are there, and if you choose to go there, different alternatives to the way we contract for services? And then looking at our financing, how can we actually, with some of the different options, give you information about where would you get the money, what does that look like, and what is the impact on all the people? It's a given that so far that all of my interactions with council has been that we like our dispatch center. We think it's professional, has a long history, and it gives very personalized service to the residents here. And that's reflected in a lot of things of, knowing the neighbors, knowing the neighborhoods, that sometimes enhances responses that we have, but clearly enhances the kind of service that we can give to residents. It's very personalized, from knowing who the neighbor is there and, oh, maybe we can go out of our way and contact somebody else. That's not always possible, even though other larger communication centers are very professional and they get the officers where they need to go, but it's not the same level of service. So a reminder, again, we're on an 800 megahertz system. The majority of the state is on that system, as is our partner Tualatin Valley, as they use the dispatch system of Washington County throughout their all different locations. Yamhill County is not on that system. We already know that. It's the 450 megahertz systems, and you'll hear some other things, and if we need to, we'll go in, and not me, either the chief or Mary will describe the UHF versus VHF component of that. But we're on a system that is shared by the majority of the state, including all of the metro counties, most of eastern Washington, all along the Columbia. There are a few places that is not on this system. Yamhill County, Lane County, and a portion of the greater Salem area, who is in the process as we speak of converting over to a 700 or an 800 megahertz system. So they've already made that commitment, and they are actually in talks with WACA to enter into a service contract like we have. So that's kind of the stuff that's going on. Let's see. Some of the other stuff that's on the memo, it kind of just reinforces the stuff of why we're here. And, you know, later in the meeting, we're going to talk about some initiatives. I think another priority of yours is to, what do we do in disasters? And, you know, how do we react? Well, one of the biggest differences between the 450 and the 800 the systems is that when we have, there's two things. One is that when we have a disaster and we have to call for resources to come in to help us, the majority of the people that are going to respond, at least that comes from the metro area, are all going to be on the 800 megahertz system. And if we're not on a similar system, so for example, we went to 450, and I know you know this, is that then we can try to communicate, and there are patches that are out there right now that we do some, but it overwhelms the system. And you don't have the providers, whether they're other firefighters to talk to police, whether it's state patrol, who does have dual system capability, and that gets to that UHF, VHF, or even Office of Emergency Management. We will not be able to communicate as easily, and easily may then translate into time, and time could translate into lives. So that's why we care about. And the chief will cover even on day-to-day of what the differences is for some of that stuff. So as we go along, then I'll ask you for, if you can, give me feedback of whether you want to look at some of the options and costs with Yamhill County and such. About 5 years ago, we asked Washington County to, what would it cost if we moved to a model that was more still staying on the 800 megahertz, and they take care of our radios, and that's a real big plus for us. The taking on a different, where they would dispatch for us. So we would become like most of the other agencies in the county. The only thing we have right now is a 2011 estimate, and the costs are, at least on the face of it, significantly cheaper. And we've not updated it very much. We've talked, their budget's gone up about 20% in the time. And at the time the estimate first came out, we were about 50% less. So that's pretty significant. What it doesn't include, and we're prepared to talk about that, not tonight, but at another time, if you wish us to go, when you switch from the model that we have to a communication contracting with Washington County, there are other impacts that we would have to cover. One could be different service levels. We just decide we're not going to do it. But others would be shifting that to other people. Like differences in the record systems that we have, that we'd have to, now it's a system where the dispatchers are taking data from calls and it goes into our record system, which makes the officer more prepared to deal with items that come up because they have records. The dispatch in Washington County, there are different record systems up there, but they're not ours. And they're truly, at least in their purest sense, a dispatch center instead of a records system. We have a hybrid of it. Other things that have an impact on law enforcement can include things like entering warrants and then doing, the check on those warrants. Our dispatch center does that now. In other places, there's typically a records person or a call goes dispatch center back to the agencies where if an officer has gotten a call and is there a warrant check on this person, something comes out, then they physically pull up the warrant and look at it and be able to react. We have that instantaneously. Other smaller things, but still important, our dispatch center also has a series of cameras that does everything from monitoring our jail, our holding cell, to entrances coming in and out of the building, to the parking lots, officer safety issues. That function would go someplace else, and having a 24-hour day. So those would be covered if you want a more comprehensive and a dollar value, because we can put dollar values against that. So a couple of things have happened. We said, well, I'll do this quickly. The financing. We talk a little bit of the dollars. How do we pay for the dispatch center now? Well, we have three sources of money. One comes out of the general fund, and of course, general fund, its primary source is property taxes. There's other monies that we get from franchises and licenses that goes into that fund. And right now, we're using about $1,100,000 to go towards dispatch from general fund. Then we receive, because we're a 911 center, which not every city is, most are not, we receive some 911 dollars, about $198,000. And then the city in the past, and this is unique to us, or generally unique, I think, is the public safety fund, where we've asked, and it shows up on our I can't say water bills, our public safety, yes. So our municipal statement, and so we have decided, or the city has decided to tax, and it's specifically for two communications dispatchers, and so that's generating $247,000. That becomes significant later if you look at different kinds of alternatives. So we think about that, $250,000 we're getting from the residents for that. And then that money is spread out primarily on people. So, we're spending 600 and, well, you can see, a lot of money, $697,000 on the people that we have, then some material services and a small capital account for that. Then we have money, and we've been setting aside money for radio upgrades. The radios that we have are very close, and the majority of them are state-of-the-art radios that fit into these new systems, and a very significant difference of what the upgrade means. So, gosh, why do people go on around this upgrade? One is officer safety. Another one is a lot of enhancements that people are coming to use, including the ability to do text. It's to a digital system, moving away from an analog, and all with that. And either the chief or Mary Newell is here also can talk about some of the enhancements that offers the community and the law enforcement to do it. So we've been putting money, like we have right now, almost $115,000 to help us go forward with that. And I'm going to stop here in a second, or take questions, or have the chief come in. So after we took the $4 million, or say 4.9, we looked at our estimate and now really put the energy into it that needs to be. of asking some questions. Well, is the estimate tied? Is it really rock solid, and can we change anything? Are there any way of additional savings that are possible? And the answer is, from the 4.9 million, yes, there are some reductions that are possible, including some of the things in that 4.9 estimate. The biggest part of that, and that's the line item that you see on that spreadsheet, it doesn't tell you a whole lot. I think it says simulcast system. And I'm going to have the chief explain that in more detail, but basically what that's talking about is the coverage in our area and Dundee, and it's really represented by the electronics and towers required to us to talk in this area, making sure that there is the minimum, or ideally no dead spots in our communication with officers. Do we have that now? Not in the same format. And when we move to digital, then it makes some of the things that we have now not possible in the same ways. That's the single biggest cost if it's there. In the earlier estimate, there are some items that are specifically attributable to a fire. We've gone through, or in this exercise, and even with Chief Sherrard sitting here, I've excised the fire to a side to say, as part of any other negotiations or relooking at the way we might transfer, the way we go forward, I pulled them out to see what does it really cost, and what's the most affordable yet still effective system that takes the fire off to the side for a second. And so there's a few things in there. There was like an alerting system that's part of the dispatch in the fire station. So I've taken that, set it into kind of a trash can that will come back, or a sidebar that will come back to talk about. Also looked at, with the transfer of the Tualatin Valley, estimates of doing a 4-console system have been reduced to a 3-console system. As of just today, so when we started this meeting, or when I put this together over the weekend for you, and I do apologize that I was late, I've struggled with this, of coming up with absolutely understanding and putting all my energy in it so that I can working with police to figure out some solutions, because when you first look at it, it's pretty daunting. $4 million price tag, and we're not rich. Who do we come, and what kinds of recommendations would I come to you, say, of cutting a service to be able to do that? Well, the good news, or thing that's much more favorable even over from the weekend from New Talks, is we believe that we can cut some of the costs, particularly in the simulcasts, particularly in doing things like working with the county on the cell towers, and maybe using some of them so we don't have to put in the same number of sites, which would exceed $1 million. So I think we can cut back from that. Now, given all that, then what Matt has done from us as finance is looked at, first, if we were to take $4 million and to finance that over 10 years, which is about the typical time for electronic equipment. So it's not like a building of 20 years, but taking 10 years, the annual payment, I think what we had in there, we were looking at $500,000 a year. So so I'll stand up here right now, and my hope or goal is that I think to get it down to somewhere in the range of $250,000 per year. Now, why I say that also leads back a second, just as one different kind of option, is if you look at, for example, putting a kind of a sense of money, that the funds that we've asked people to pay for a communications officer for the 2 equals $250,000. So just a way of looking at things. I'm going to stop for a second. If you have some other questions, other than that, then, and he's not prepared to do this, I put him on the spot, but just talking from the law enforcement and the police side, if there's some things that would help you as you kind of give us direction.
Councilor McKinney?
Is it 4 million or 4.9 million?
4.9 is what the spreadsheet is, but I saw from just even the time the spreadsheet, I thought without much difficulty and just the updating of those numbers, that it's trim. I'm started at 4, and now I'm going from 4 to, and the simulcast reduction is not, it's in the 4, so I haven't reduced that out yet. And we've been told it's the possibility that that could be 1/2 the amount that's shown in there. So that's where I'm getting to get closer to hopefully the 2.5 million.
Follow on. Your mic, please.
I had a question for Mary Newell. Is that if you go from 4 consoles to 3, what's the, if you go from 4 consoles to 3, what's the real impact?
We currently
Tell me
have,
your name.
Mary Newell, Newberg Dundee Police. We currently have 3 full consoles now, and we keep 2 people on at all times. So really, it was an added value that they've attached on there. For the quote, it was the most optimal, and at the time they did the quote, we still had fire.
Okay, so the 4th console was kind of optional thinking right now.
That's correct.
Councilor Corey?
Yes, the 4 million figure that we're talking about indicates that it's replacing police radios and enhancing the present communication system. That's whatever's required to do that is $4 million. Now, that's one way of looking at it, but the other side of that is I'm not seeing the numbers for if we contracted with WACA. Either I didn't understand that, I don't see it here, or is that not under consideration with this?
So it's partially in there, and that's if you see the last quote that we have, and that's where I was explaining that WACA right now maintains our radios. So regardless, that's why I was saying we're looking at 2 different things: dispatch, communication, and radios. If we want to stay in the 800 megahertz system, irregardless, we're going to need to upgrade the radios. Then the other part of this, and so this would, for lack of a better word, compare what are the salaries and benefits and operation that our dispatchers have versus what would it cost to go with WACA of, being like other agencies. The quote that's shown in here was the one in 2011. And so if you want that additional go back, then we'll get a updated quote from them to do that. Are we going to save 50%? Like, it looked like in a way some of that was, it really wasn't 50%. It was 50 for people, but you also had radios, even back then, that had to be upgraded. So,
Follow
Follow
on.
on.
Okay, I'm just trying to get the numbers correct,
Okay.
so I understand, because I either am not picking up something or I'm not
Okay.
seeing it here.
okay,
It looks like, right now, under the page 4, under financial, that our expenses for the present system that we have now, just the 911 system, and including personnel and materials and so forth, is approximately, let's round it to 1.2 million, it looks like.
okay.
Okay. So, and unless I'm missing something, it appears like the contract with WACA, old numbers, but let's say we add 20% like it indicates
Right.
here, we're still at, say, 600,000, maybe 700,000
That's,
at the most, I would say.
yes, that's
So
correct.
that's big dollar difference. That's $500,000 in a year
It is.
that we'd be saving by going to WACA, or am I missing something?
The part that's missing out of that, and this was from an earlier discussion I think that council had, and I'm prepared to come back to the next one, because, I anticipate maybe you would ask for that, is that goes to the issue of there are services in the number that we say with dispatch right now that we provide to the officers to run the department that is not something that would go over to WACA. And that was talking about the records system, that if you don't have that, and so that's a people side of it and a software side. And so, for example, if you have two records people, if it was that equivalent, it's a little more complicated than that, but we'll be prepared to come back. You can add 250,000 to the contract. So then the 250 plus, if it's 20% more to that, it's likely or possible it's going to still be less, but how much less, it's more, I think, on the magnitude 10, 20% in there. But if you want us, that's part of what I'm asking for tonight, you say, yeah, I want those numbers before we have next discussion. We'll get a revised quote, and then we'll bring back what we did once before, staff did, was saying, here's the difference in operation, how might we make up for that function with somebody else?
One more follow-on?
Hold on.
Yes, I definitely would like that, because that's the avenue I would like to see us approach at this point. With that kind of dollar number, to me, that's high dollars. And I think the taxpayers of Newberg would be well served to save the dollars. We would not lose police communication with records. They can still communicate. It's not like we're going to lose that avenue. They're right next door to each other. So I would rather look on the savings of dollars for the taxpayers than, well, keep this and we'll spend more because they have this, contact or whatever, so.
And we clearly do that. The one part that's missing out of that a little bit, and then I'll jump in, is that right now what you have is 24/7. So some of the activities they're doing, like those records one, it's not a records like we think about it in like City Hall records, where, hey, we have this, and maybe we need to do this to process a planning application. The fact that dispatch is 24/7 and accesses records for something that happens 2 o'clock in the morning, they need that. And whether it occurs in dispatch the way it does now, or it goes, we have some other arrangement where you have that 24/7. Now, some departments have used police officers to get that kind of information. It's a time lag, and then you get police officers. So, of course.
So a couple things on the record issue. Brian Casey, Chief of Police. What the city manager's referring to as far as record search is that when the officers radio in and they say, I'm speaking with John Doe, or I have John Doe stopped, the dispatcher can immediately search our records, whereas a records clerk in the records division isn't going to be able to do that. And WACA doesn't do that type of service and wouldn't have access to our types of internal records that we have. And our dispatchers have done a tremendous job of catching information, finding people, finding information from our internal database that they can access immediately. And then one other quick point on the records is that if we were to eliminate our dispatch center, we'd probably have to hire 2 or 3 additional records people to do the service that the dispatchers are doing now as far as their data entry. And so that's some of the costs that we wouldn't save. So if it looks like it's 500,000 savings, it's really not going to be. By the time we hire back 2 or 3 people, they're going to be significantly less. Yeah.
Councilor Johnson.
And I'm mostly just trying to get information here. I haven't formed an opinion yet. I want to make that ultimately clear. I'm having a hard time tracking the report, and that's no fault of yours. I'm tired. And what I'd like to know is the number of calls between fire and police that the center takes in. And then, as luck would have it, over the weekend I actually had to use the system, and everybody's fine. And ended up talking to WACA, and was curious, under the current plan, and maybe I've just spaced something, are we paying them now to do the fire, or is that included in the TVF&R contract, or, and that's just more curiosity for me, because, I'm just I lost that piece somewhere.
Okay, well, currently, fire makes up maybe 12, excuse me, this is Mary
Okay.
Newell again. Currently, fire calls make up 12 to 15% of the telephone calls that come in. So the bulk of the activities are law enforcement related.
Okay.
As far as how they're
How it
paying,
was between the two, what was the mixture of police and fire before?
We had about, we initiated about 30,000 CAD calls a year, the police department did, and the fire department had about 5,000 calls for service.
Okay.
If that helps you.
Excellent, thank you.
You had a follow-up?
Yeah, 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 okay, thanks. And then currently, we're using
Mayor, can I answer the rest of that? The other part of that is that we're paying, this is why really important to see the dispatch and the radio portion of it. We have choices on radio systems, who works on them and who keeps ours up. We pay WACA a dollar amount per each of our radios. And that's by choice, because both they know our radios, becomes real important later on in the discussion of the vendors statewide versus what we have in Yamhill County. So Motorola is by a competitive bid and all that, they're the largest one, and they are working on the radios for a per unit cost. Am I not getting it right?
no, that's correct. Mary Newell again. We pay a per radio cost of approximately $420. What is it? $430? $430 approximately.
And we have how many radios?
Oh, the police department has 83 radios right now. There are other radios out there that we're not charged for mutual aid radios that we've loaned to other agencies in case they have to respond on our behalf.
Kenny?
Three things. Thank you for the clarification to Mr. Corey's question about records. I think there's some give and take there. We don't know if there's a clear savings yet in relationship to that. Do the present radios have a resale value that would offset any of these lines? That's one inquiry that I have. And then, Joe, you mentioned in your remarks that there are some things that our system does now that would have to be added components to this contract if we're going to do all of the things that we're doing now, but if we add those extra features, there would be an associated cost. Did I hear that?
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Probably I just wasn't clear enough. This whole process of upgrading the system is what allows us to go on to the other platform of digital that adds those things. So it's like if we upgrade, then we get these added features to it. So it's not like we'd look for anything that was an add-on that even if somebody else had, that we could pull off naturally to savings to make it, and I would look for those, but I don't see any of those. So it's not like take off the text messaging in order to get us through the start. It's not that kind of a quote for us.
Question that Councilor McKinney had about resale.
We don't know the answer yet. We've got that as something to find out, both the consoles and any of the other equipment. And that's also why you heard one thing that might be useful, because it go, so if you have 83 radios and you have how many officers? We have radios in a couple different settings, and Mary can cover that, but we have some that are in cars, some that are on the console station, and some that officers have. And so that's why the number of radios doesn't equal the number of officers that we have. But our intent is to find out if we have any resale. We think this number is might also be a little more credit to us for two things. One is that the police department was successful in getting a grant from Homeland Security that we actually purchased some radios. Well, we bought the new ones, the ones that are compatible with the upgrade. And so we're making sure the list that we've gotten from the quote was based on, does that give credit for these new ones? And then in a line item that we have in the current budget is about $113,000 for radio replacements. So presumably that money is there that would also reduce the quote that came from WACA. So we're figuring out how that would go in.
Councilor Essen.
On the, in the situation, if we were to buy these new radios and we had the Cascadia earthquake, would they still work? And to add to that, would we be better off with the people we have now, or would we be better off contracting?
Well,
Two questions.
yeah, that's a great hypothetical question. As far as the earthquake, there's a lot of redundancy in the systems. And so, it's hard to say that, if you had a Cascadia earthquake, would it, totally knock your system out, or would it knock some of them out and there'd be some redundancy? I think that's probably impossible to answer. But I would say that your question was, if we went to the new system, would we have a better chance of surviving that with the radio system? I think that if we had our own dispatch center, we'd probably be more likely to maintain one of the two, because it wouldn't be in a consolidated dispatch center. So, for example, if WACA got knocked out, then we'd be knocked out if the redundancy system didn't work. So our dispatch center provides another layer of redundancy to the overall system, if that makes sense. And I'm sorry, what was the second?
Well, I think what I was asking, which would be better off with what we currently have, I think that was the second part, or would we be better off with contracted with another agency in that particular? Let's say, my understanding, talking to our people handling the computers, to give you an idea of what a Cascadia earthquake is, the earth moves 20 feet sideways. And that means there's not a lot of wires hooked together anymore. So we're going to have some sort of backups as far as, all the power goes off. We don't have any power anywhere. So we must have batteries and all those things that go, that are in place. And then also, we'd also have power generators that we would hope would work and this kind of thing. And so with that in mind, if we had our own dispatch center, my question is to be, it seems like that would be a better thing, because we would have all of that stuff local. I don't know who would be contracting. If they're over a bridge, they won't do us any good. They can radio, but nobody's getting to us. All the bridges are down, and all the wires are all cut. Everything's cut. And so I want to make sure we're taking that into consideration when we're making our decision, that we redundancy. We have to have people that are able to, for those that survive that are here. And if they're somewhere else, will we be better off, here or there? And I guess that's a question you can say, I don't know, and that'd be fine.
Well, like I said, it's tough to answer, but there's a lot of redundancy in the 800 system because there's a lot of people on it. And, having our own dispatch center adds another layer of redundancy to that. And I think that's just the best way to answer that at this time.
Anything further that you want to pass on to the or any further questions?
Mayor, just that what I've heard is that you'd like a quote from WACA, and we'll do the comparison. We'll show what, and it's repeat from earlier, but the information is there, and we'll put dollar amounts next to it that we'll talk about. If we switch over to a contract, what are the consequences? We're going to go to find out about cost savings with the county. At this moment, unless you say you would like this information, I wasn't planning on going back to Yamhill County at this time, other than just as professionals, we'd love to see if the county would move to an 800 system to match the rest of the majority of the state. So, but I understand that hasn't been terribly successful in the past. And then we will check and see about, we'll get a, is there a resale value, and can we do something with that? We can do a little bit more about describing what the redundancy means. So much of our system is microwave or using these towers, and that's why the towers are part of these proposals. And there's a series of them, some that Yamhill County has, some that the state has, some Homeland Security has, and some that WACA has. And part of this proposal was to bring some other ones onto this side of the mountains to provide our service, both that's critical, even more critical for fire along 97, because there are some dead spots there, but also of covering the areas, some that are kind of building related, few, but then just outside of our city limits. So we'll do a description of that redundancy.
I have one question. Has there been, or is there any credibility in exploring other agencies within a reasonable distance that would either be coming onto an 800 system and/or would be willing or desirous of partnering with the city of Newberg and its dispatch center?
So it's dispatching with like Lake Oswego. Do you know
Well,
any of
we've had some discussions with some other cities in Yamhill County about being dispatched out of our dispatch center, and it's, I don't think it's financially, there's enough money there to have any impact on our budget, and I don't see that happening, and certainly there won't be anybody from Washington County that would come onto our system.
So, Mayor, then I think the other question is, on the other communication centers like Lake Oswego, who has a separate communication, have we asked them if they might contract? The answer is no. We'll ask. The Salem system right now that's moving to an 800 system, they're actually asking WACA for a quote of what it would take for them to go into that system in the same arrangements that we have. We'll talk to them and say, if that doesn't go through, is there any logic for us to go with them, and what could be the cost? So we'll do that. I can get quotes from other similar, like 800 systems.
Matter of curiosity,
Okay.
what do they have in Polk, Lincoln, and Tillamook counties? Do you know?
I can address that one.
Please, thank you, Mary.
This is Mary Newell. Willamette Valley, which is our Salem dispatch center, dispatches for Tillamook County. Lincoln County has their own dispatch center.
They dispatch for whom?
Tillamook County.
Salem dispatches for Tillamook?
Yeah, there was a consolidation a couple of years ago. And then Metcom, which used, if you know the lingo, used to be Norcom. It's the other dispatch center in Marion County. There was also a large consolidation there as well, and they took over the Santiam Dispatch Center, which is, southeast of Salem. So they've grown quite a bit in the last 2 years.
And Lincoln County, you said was,
Yeah, I think it's still the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office.
thank you. Counselor Johnson, Counselor McKinney, Counselor Essen.
One last question for me. If we keep our current dispatch center, when TVF&R, when we make a decision whether we're switching to them full-time, would the system work as it does today, where people would call into our dispatch center, we'd be asked, police, fire, you say fire, then you get transferred up to WACA? Is that how it would continue to operate?
I don't see any changes coming about in that regard.
Okay.
It might become easier when we do our software upgrade.
Okay, thanks.
Counselor McKinney?
You used to talk about regionalization. In this area, would WACA be the core of that regionalization idea as it was posed, several years ago? We were very fortunate 4 or 5 years ago is that we had a line item that when we needed radios, we had the dough on hand to make the necessary purchases to go digital in that particular case. But and then with Fire Chief in the back there, in terms of regionalization, is WACA kind of the core idea there?
It is. They're who we contract now. Now, we're unique in that we're the southernmost part of that region, but there are just a limited number of providers. That's what we mentioned in, Clackamas County, Washington County. There's another smaller center, if you want to say, in the Lake Oswego area, but yeah, we're part of that regionalization concept. And ideally, Yamhill County would be part of that also. But, so, yes, right now they're the logical person and they are providing the service. We'll check about Salem and including talking at Lake Oswego to that center too.
Follow on, if I may. Washington County 2,
Correct.
Washington County Fire District 2, are they through WACA also?
Anybody know? Brian?
Yes. The answer is yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Counselor Essen?
Was it correct that I heard there were this $4 million is gonna purchase 83 radios?
If you look at the spreadsheet, what this covers, the most expensive, do you still have that spreadsheet that I sent out or maybe not?
Apparently I don't
Okay,
have it.
well, then I'll make sure we get another one. On a spreadsheet, it details what's on there. The bulk of it is this thing, the item that talks about simulcast system, which is the towers and the operation for us to be
That's it.
locally in dispatch. The radios is a line item there, and again, it's kind of cryptic if you want, that talks about law enforcement subscribers. And it's significant, but it's not the bulk of it. And that's the one we have, and I didn't provide that for you, glad to do it, but it listed each one of our radios and what its current status is and whether it'll work with the new system. We're just verifying that some of our improvements, that when Mary got the grant before, or when the city got the grant for that they come off the list, or they say, we don't need to do anything else. So the cost for all 83, if everything, I think was shown as like $300,000, but it's not that much. That'll be revised next time we get together.
Okay. Yeah, because otherwise, the 83 radios, and everything that goes with them comes to $47,058 each. I mean, must be everything there must be a lot of stuff going with those 83 radios, because $4 million, I'm not figuring 5, divided by 85, is $47,000.
That's one way to look at it. I don't know how, there may be a different way of looking at it, that there's money for the dispatch system and the consoles and all that, and then we do have X number of radios, and if you divide all the cost in that, you can get to a per unit. I don't hear that used too often. What you do hear is one of the justifications or descriptions of the Yamhill County system, that the radios that are currently used in that system are significantly, probably a 10% cost of the radios that are required to go to the digital 800 system. Ours and all of everything's competitively bid, so we take advantage of Motorola, but they are significantly higher in what they provide and what they cost, and therefore, if something happens to them, the replacement, which was a strong financial argument of why Yamhill County, one of the reasons why they're using the system that they have with those radios.
You raised a question in my mind, and then I got sidetracked. If we are required to, we are facing a requirement to upgrade our radios because of, that he may keep that, because of national or federal requirements, why are not other radio systems required to do the same thing? I lost track in there.
I've talked too much, so I'll let the chief answer that. And it's requirements is maybe not exactly the right thing to say, but
Yeah, well, I think it's been a hope of the federal government to mandate that everybody be on a digital.
Excuse me just a moment, Chief. Can you close the door? We're getting background noise there. Thank you. Go ahead, Chief.
So I don't believe that that mandate has been set in place at this time, that every agency, there was talk of it and they've been pushing for it. But our primary reason for going on to the digital system isn't because of federal mandates, or that's not why Washington County's doing it. It's because the analog system is coming to its end of its lifespan. They're no longer going to be maintaining the system, building spare parts for it. They're not going to be working on the system. It's going to be obsolete, and they're transitioning to the brand new digital operating system. So
Is that applicable whether it's 800 or 700 or 450?
Well, it depends on the system. Motorola is not going to be supporting the 800 analog system anymore. I can't tell you about the 450
Okay, thank
system, so to speak. So,
Appreciate that. Other questions of the presenters? Chief, thank you. Mary, thank you very much. City Manager, thank you very much. Is there anything further? There isn't? Thank you very much for a good briefing. Anything else for the council and work session? None appearing. We'll be in recess for approximately 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene in our business session.
Somehow I've actually